Home maintenance. This is a video on how to do MIG welding without gas, and I borrowed this MIG welder from my neighbor. My neighbor didn't know too much about using it, so I went down to the welding store and got some advice about how to use a MIG welder. I've done welding before. I've used rods and gas welding, acetylene torch welding, but I've never used MIG welding equipment. So the people down at the store said that with this MIG welder I need to get a gas. It's like a argon gas that makes the welding better, and the gas bottle is supposed to hook to this tube here. So I went down to Air Gas Company and asked them about getting a bottle of gas, and they said yes, they have it, and you also have to get these pressure gauges that go along with it. So the gauges were going to cost about $120 and the gas bottle about $60, which is quite a bit of money, and all I wanted to do was a small welding job for about a half an hour, and I probably wouldn't use the MIG welder again for quite a long time. So I went around town asking some friends about borrowing a gas bottle and the pressure gauges, and nobody had them available. So I went back to the company to buy the gas bottle and the new gauges, which was about almost $200 investment for a half-hour welding job. And another guy that worked there, he said, well, why don't you use flux core wire, then you won't have to get a gas bottle. I said, what's that? And he said, it's the wire that you use to weld with a MIG welder. It has flux inside of it. And I said, sure, I'd like to get that. Do you have any? And he said, yes, we do. And so I was getting ready to buy the flux core wire, and I asked the guy if he could put it into the machine for me. So we went outside, and he took off this cover plate here, and what we found was the wire, this roll of wire in there, it's already flux core wire. And so I didn't even need to buy the wire. Everything that I needed was right there, and this MIG welder was ready to be used without buying the gas bottle or pressure gauges, and I didn't even need to get a new roll of wire. And here's a picture of the tip of the MIG welder, and you see that wire there, and there's actually flux that's inside there, and the flux cleans the metal as you're welding. And so I spent 2 hours learning about the gas bottles and pressure gauge and flux core wire, and then found out I already had that in the machine. So then I went to the welding site, and the next thing I did was went to the welding shop, and I asked the welder advice about how to set this machine. And he said, what you do, this is a 120 volt welder, and he said you plug it in and then you turn it on here, and then he said to set the power to the maximum, because 120 volt welder doesn't have as much power as a 240 volt, so you want the maximum voltage here, especially since I'm welding rebar. And then he said to set this to about 4, and then when you're welding you can either speed it up or slow it down. And what this setting does is that as you're welding, that wire comes out of the tip of the welder, the roll of wire in there, it turns, and there's a feeding mechanism that pushes the wire out from the tip of the welder as you're welding, so that you're getting a constant supply of wire and flux as you're welding. And the wire acts as the material that welds the whatever you're welding together. The arc from the electricity creates a heat that melts the wire and the flux, and then that melts onto the material you're welding, and that does the welding. So anyway, I found the setting of 4 to be about right, and then this ground clamp here, this is for the ground for the MIG welder, and what you do is you clamp this onto the material that you're welding. In my case, I'm welding rebar, So I just clamp this onto the rebar, and that makes a complete circuit when you're welding. Complete circuit between the tip of the wire there and the ground clamp. So that's basically how you use a MIG welder to weld without using gas. And for simple welding, it works really well. I've welded this rebar over the window, and it holds well enough that I think it'll discourage any burglars from trying to break in again. We had a burglar in this building last week. They broke the glass and got into the building. That's why the owner wanted me to do some welding to put rebar over there to discourage any more burglars from getting in. And I read in the news that same week that there was a gang of burglars going across the country from town to town and doing various burglaries, and that may have been what happened in our town. So anyway, what's that?
Your feed bar. It brings your wire out.
Oh yeah, and then also you got this feed button here, and when you're welding, you push this button, and that brings the wire out to keep a continuous feed of wire coming out as you're welding, because the wire melts as you're welding. So you just depress this button, and that feeds the wire out to the tip of the welder. Any other ideas? Anyway, it was a good welder. Just simple 120 volt MIG welder. Does a pretty good job for basic welding jobs. Real heavy duty things like welding cars and big structures that hold a lot of weight, you probably want to use a higher power welder like 240 volts, and in those kind of cases you may need the gas bottles and all that stuff. But the flux core wiring does a pretty good job, and it's simple to use. Okay, so hope this video helps, and thanks for watching.